one of the issues, one common issue which has come through is the idea of, well, what happens if you've got a company that has been deregistered or in the process of being deregistered, and we now need to go and update details or submit documents? Who do we deal with? The second question was the chicken and the egg scenario of where do you deregister first? Because SIPSI wants a tax clearance certificate and SARS wants a SIPSI deregistration certificate. This is part of the reason why, as I said, I know SIPSI and SARS are in talks at the moment to try and resolve some of these procedural issues so that they're singing from the same hymn sheet, as it were, and allowing us to have a streamlined process that works for both SIPSI and SARS in conjunction together, and we can then go from there. Now, to me, if I was thinking this through, it would seem to make more sense that you have to deregister with SARS first and then deregister with SIPSI, because ultimately you want SIPSI to only actually make the company die when it's cleared all creditors. I know SARS's concern is if they do that, well, then what everyone's just going to do is register the company with SIPSI, get the SARS number, deregister from SARS, and then merrily keep going along with the company, now having lost the SARS registration. So hence there is still, I think, going to be some procedural discussions as to how they can best fix that from a practical point of view. Right. Generally, as I said, the risk here, and I also have this conversation a good few times with people, is to say, but look, why go through all the hassle? Why go through all the hassle in for this, and why not just let everything lapse and just basically walk away and go and say, company's dead, there's no assets left, I'm done. Two issues with that. Issue one is just the warm fuzzies type of feeling, in the sense that by not having deregistered, it's like that lurking little, they'll show you those documentaries of people who live in France near the, or in, well, Europe, along the lines where we had the World War I trench warfares, and they're still finding unexploded bombs. The SIPSI and the SARS can be like one of those. You think where it may not be ticking, you may not know it now, but it can still come back and explode on you a little bit later. In the sense of either SARS picking up an old debt, which they suddenly want to come after you for, or not being able to get clearance certificates for future endeavors that you've entered into because you haven't properly deregistered this one. I've seen a company, an individual who is now not getting his VAT registration processed because they've managed to link the same individual to 3 or 4 other entities, where he basically started the entity, registered them for VAT, claimed the input, never declared the output, and then when he thought he couldn't get away with it anymore, just left the company, started a new one. And then I gone and said, we're not registering you again, fix that. So that's the one. The second thing is that it also just means it's also the practical issue of the fact that it is always going to come back and reflect and be a risk that then there's additional tax debts that get raised. Where at least if you've gone and done the formal deregistration, you can have the certainty that SARS can't ever come back to you later and say, oh, but you actually still owe on this company, because you can go with your letter and say, but you told me I'd settled everything in full. So, yeah, depends on your view. One of the other questions that I got was, what do we mean by days? And one of the issues was that, in particular, someone was worried about, they'd submitted an objection at the beginning of December and only got their response towards the middle of Feb. And they were going, but SARS just took the month of December off. And that's not because SARS is actually doing anything wrong. Legally, that's actually what the Tax Administration Act says. the Tax Administration Act actually, in its definition of business days, specifically excludes the 15th of December to the 15th of January. So those days are not counted as business days for the purposes of the Tax Administration Act. And this is a double-edged sword, because yes, if you're wanting a response from SARS, then this can be heck of a frustrating because it adds an extra month. On the flip side, if you're the person who's having to respond to an objection, it buys you an extra month. Right? It was included just to deal with the practical reality that while South Africa shuts down over December, and otherwise we just end up, could you imagine trying to run a tax practice where the days didn't stop over December? In fact, it actually, if you are still working during December, it gives you some time to do some catch up because you're actually in free days, as it were. Right. However, if you are looking at the days that have been given to you, please just make sure, check whether you're dealing with legislative days, which would be business days. So that's things like the 31 days to deal with an objection versus the days which are more voluntary, like, for example, SARS's response time to a call center query. 21 days is actually not legislated anywhere. That just comes from the SARS service charter. So that they can change willy-nilly, and generally they are talking standard working days without that TAA 15 extra 15 to 15.